to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. Going to kind of start off with the economy first, mainly because, well, it's not really been in anybody's headlines. And I really think that we are in that catch-22 where the Fed doesn't know how to make a move, because really any move that they make right now could be catastrophic. So they're kind of holding right now. But in doing that, again, catch-22, by not moving it, they're keeping rates artificially low, making the situation worse. And, it's been something we've been talking about. And even if we get rid of the Fed, a lot of people don't understand this. If we get rid of the Fed, the free market would take over interest rates. But again, because we've been artificially low for way too long, it's still going to bite us in the butt. What the Fed has done to the U.S. dollar is going to bite us in the butt. So there is no good way out. There is a right way out, and eventually the market will fix itself. But there is no... If you keep the Fed, get rid of the Fed. If the Fed stays, lowers interest rates, raises, there is no... They've done too much already. I'm going to get into a Ron Paul Liberty report. And Ron Paul interviewed Jim Rickards. And this one is titled The Road to Ruin. And he covers the Fed and our economic situations that we are in right now, and the similarities between like 2008 and so on. So we'll go ahead and dive into that, and then I got some articles I want to cover too.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Co-host today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Very good. We have a special guest today.
Indeed.
Talking about an issue I talk a lot about, and it's so important. It has to do with the importance of money. He's been a friend for quite a few years, and I'm always fascinated with his books. Our guest today is Jim Rickards. And Jim, I want to welcome you to the program.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, great. And before we get started and ask you about your new book, I want to mention to the audience that you have you've been writing, and you've had several books on the New York Times bestseller list. One of my favorites has been the one that came out in 2014, I believe. It was Currency Wars. And I would think that the war is not over, but I think the war has already started, and we may be talking a little bit about that. But you also wrote something this year, the new case for gold. There's been an old case for gold, and it's probably very similar, but there is a case for gold, and another book you wrote was Death of Money. But your newest book is what we want to talk about, and this is called The Road to Ruin. And who wants to go to ruin? We want to have an election and solve all our problems. So we want to talk about that. So why don't you give us a brief update on this, and then we'll follow up with a little discussion on your book.
Sure, Dr. Paul. This is really the third volume of a projected quartet. So the books you mentioned, Currency Wars, Volume 1, The Death of Money, Volume 2, and this is The Road to Ruin, which is Volume 3. Also had The New Case for Gold. That was a tribute to work that you did along with others in the early 80s when the Minority Report of the Reagan Gold Commission was published as The Case for Gold. So my book was called The New Case for Gold, but that was a conscious tribute to your earlier work. But this is part of this quartet. What I do, Dr. Paul, is I look at the near collapse of the financial system in 1998. That was, the Russia long-term capital crisis. Then we had another near collapse in 2008. On both occasions, 1998 and 2008, we were just days, if not hours away from the complete collapse of every bank or the closure of every stock exchange in the world. That's not an exaggeration. That was well documented. I was actually very involved in I negotiated the bailout of long-term capital management in 1998, and of course we all recall 2008. So what I do, I take the story 10 years forward to 2018, but that's just an estimate. This is something that could happen tomorrow. And I make the point that in each crisis, the bailout gets bigger and the problem gets worse. So 1998, Wall Street bailed out a hedge fund. In 2008, the central banks bailed out Wall Street. In 2018, if not sooner, who's going to bail out the central banks? They haven't normalized their balance sheets. They haven't undone the work what they did, the money printing that they did after 2008. They no longer have the capacity to save the system. The next bailout's going to come from the International Monetary Fund with their world money, the special drawing right, or SDR. They've got the only clean balance sheet left. They're going to flood the world with trillions of SDRs. They'll finally get the inflation that they haven't been able to get all these years. The only safe haven will be, gold or other hard assets, land, silver, fine art. There are a number of things you can have, but I use physics, behavioral economics, and hard science to analyze this and explain to readers how this is going to happen.
Right. I think that your suggestion of what they might do is very much on, because that's why they were there. They thought they'd do this a long time, and SDRs are very important. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if they do exactly what you say. I don't think that'll be the answer, and because it's also going to be a failed fiat currency. But in the meantime, they're going to do something and contribute to the chaos. But I do have a question on timing, and you recognize when you make your predictions, as all individuals who understand the free market, is we may know trends, and we know that what inflating the money supply does, and all these things, and wreaking, interest rates. But your book on Currency Wars, I think, was right on, because I believe we're in the middle of that. It's in the middle of this campaign because there's been charges, currency manipulations. We have to stop that. But right now, the one currency that I'm interested in watching, of course, is the dollar. And it looks like they're starting to sell some dollars, around the world, especially the Saudis and China. Do you believe that that's sort of cracking right now? Do you look at those charts where say, we're getting awfully close, because they're not rampantly leaving the dollar, but it suggests to me that they may be starting to. I just wanted to get your assessment on that and the timing as well.
Well, you're exactly right, Dr. Paul. There's no question that the Chinese, and certainly the Russians, they've seen their reserve position come down. The Saudi Arabians and others are selling U.S. dollar assets. They're selling the U.S. government securities. However, the reason we haven't had a big spike in interest rates is because the U.S. banking system is now captive to the Federal Reserve. So remember, as you know better than anyone, for every seller, there's a buyer, and the banks are being forced to pick up the slack. They are, they are the buyers of last resort. So, in 2008, the big banks were bailed out, and the bankers couldn't believe their luck. They said, hey, you saved my stock, you saved my bank, I keep my phony baloney job, I can still make $1 million bonuses, and they felt that they had got a free pass. But what they didn't realize is that they were now working for the government. In the 1950s, a typical commercial bank balance sheet had about 50% Treasury securities, the rest, some mortgages and commercial loans. Today, that percentage is down around 10%, means there's a lot of headroom between 10% and 50%. This is what, as you know, this is what's called financial repression. So, yeah, the Saudis and the Chinese are getting out of treasuries, but the Federal Reserve and the bank regulators will force the banks to buy these treasuries. So there will be a ready market for them. But, of course, what that means is that the banks can't do anything else. They're just going to be big government bond funds working for the Federal Reserve. This is, one manipulation leads to another. Once you go down that path, holding interest rates low, inflating the Federal Reserve balance sheet, you have to keep going down the path. And the next step will be financial repression, where the banks are forced buyers of Treasury securities.
Right. Daniel has a question for you.
Yeah, Mr. Pickett, I was interested in your description of what this next crash may look like. You, of course, talked about 98 and 08, and you're saying somewhere around 18, but then again, maybe tomorrow. Right. And from, the U.S. military presence overseas, and you've been a consultant to the Pentagon and to the intelligence community, but, we have 800 military bases in 70 countries. That's a minimum. And the presence there is considered a stabilizing factor in a lot of these countries. But you mentioned in the coming crash, literally banks closing, no money for 2 weeks or what have you, people burning down banks. This sounds like something very dramatic at home. How would you see this affecting at least the perceived stability of the U.S. presence overseas?
Well, every great political power, whether it's an empire, seaborne empire, throughout history, there's never been a great power that didn't have a great currency. So when you see the U.S. dollar weakening and you see stress in our currency, that's almost synonymous with the decline of the U.S. ability to basically project authority around the world. Now, I once was at a meeting at the Pentagon with, they have a chief futurist. He has a different title. It's the Office of Net Assessment under the Secretary of Defense. But I was meeting with him in a secure facility in the Pentagon, and I said, the time will come when a U.S. destroyer will pull up at a fuel depot in Singapore, and you'll say, fill her up with fuel, and the dock operator will say, fine, pay me in SDRs. In other words, for the first time, you're going to have a very expensive forward deployed military that you have to pay for in a currency that you don't print. And that really made an impact. They I think the Pentagon understood this better than the Treasury and the Fed. I've had those same discussions downtown with the Treasury and the Fed, and they just assume the dollar will always be, king dollar. But the military understood that with a weak currency, you're going to weaken the military. So that is a threat to national security. As far as closing the banks is concerned, I do write about that in the book. And the point I make is that the best description of a financial panic I've ever heard is everybody wants his money back. People think they have money. They say, I have money in the stock market. I have money in the bond market. No, you don't. You have stocks and you have bonds, but you don't have money. If you want money, you have to sell those things and try to get money. And, of course, in a panic, everyone's selling at the same time. So people actually don't really understand what money is. But in a panic, everybody wants their money back. In 1998, they printed the money and gave it to you. In 2008, they printed the money and gave it to you. But in the next crisis, the central banks are at the outer limit of what they can do. And the IMF, even if they try to print SDRs, and I agree with Dr. Paul, it might not work. They're going to try it. That doesn't mean it'll work, but they will try it. That'll take 6-7 months. Meanwhile, they're not going to give you your money back. Money market funds are going to suspend redemptions. Banks will be closed. Stock exchanges will be closed. They're going to lock down the system. And people say, oh, that will never happen. But, of course, in 1933, President Roosevelt closed every bank in America by executive order. And when he did it, he didn't say when they were going to reopen. It turned out it was about 8 days later. He didn't say that. For 5 months in 1914, the New York Stock Exchange was closed from July to December. All these things have happened before. The legal authorities are in place. Don't need an act of Congress. The president can do it with a phone call. So I'm just warning investors, get ready for that world where you may want your money back, but you won't be able to get it.
You know, another tool they have been using is this movement toward not allowing or not wanting people to use cash, the
Right.
cashless society. And how does that figure in? Because you said people want their money, and they don't realize that, you know, a stock or a bond doesn't immediately turn into money, especially when we have difficulty defining our money. So the fact now that a lot of people have moved away just out of practicality, it's easier to use a credit card. Does this help the establishment in doing this, the fact that people don't even think about cash? Is this a practical thing that they're doing, or do you think they're trying to get everybody out of cash for this precise reason, that they don't want people hoarding cash and they would like to have more control over the system?
There's no doubt about it. You know, Dr. Paul, before you slaughter cattle, you have to herd them into a pen. And before investors and savers get slaughtered by the government, they're being herded into digital pens at one of a small number of banks. You know, negative interest rates are coming. We already see them in Europe, Switzerland, Japan, and elsewhere. They may be coming to the United States. We don't have them yet, but the Fed's taking a look at it. Well, if you put $100,000 in the bank with a negative 1% interest rate, what that means is you come back a year later, you only have $99,000. The government took $1,000, or the bank rather took $1,000 out of your bank account. Well, the easiest way around that, of course, is to take your money out of the bank, have physical cash, put it in a safe place, and you'll still have your money after a year. So they've got to get rid of cash in order to impose the negative interest rates. Now, people think that they can walk down to the bank and get their cash anytime they want. I have news for them. It's not that easy. Go to your local bank and ask for, $15,000 in cash. The teller's face will turn white. She'll call the branch manager over. They'll ask you, why do you want it? What's your business? They'll ask you for ID. They'll file a currency transaction report. That goes to something called the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, government agency. You'll be put in a file right next to terrorists, drug dealers, tax evaders, etc. Bear in mind, you're a completely honest American citizen who just wants to get his hands or her hands on some cash. You will be treated like a criminal. If you take a smaller amount, maybe say $5,000, do that twice in a row. That's structuring, which is actually a crime, and they'll file a suspicious activity report. So, people ask me how the war on cash is going. I say, well, the war on cash is over. The government won. You may think you can get your cash, but you can't. However, you can still buy real estate, income-producing property, gold. There are other tangible assets that will preserve wealth. But to me, having some physical cash, it's I live in an area where we get hurricanes. I have batteries and flashlights in case the power is out. Same thing. If the power is out, the ATMs don't work, the gas stations can't pump. It might be convenient to have some cash, but they're making it harder and harder to get it. And certainly for very large amounts, I would say impossible. There's a call to get rid of the $100 bill. Europe just got rid of the 500 euro note. They still have a 200 euro note. Ken Rogoff, Harvard professor, just wrote a book called The Curse of Cash, which is a manifesto to get rid of cash completely. When they take away your liberty, they always justify it. They say, well, we got to get rid of those nasty drug dealers and terrorists. Well, I did counterterrorism work for the government for 10 years. I have no sympathy for terrorists or drug dealers or tax evaders. But why is it always at the cost of liberty? Why aren't people at liberty to have cash if they want it? Well, the government won't permit it.
Right. Daniel.
Yeah, you touched on this already, Mr. Rickards, and I wanted to maybe circle back on it because I thought it was fascinating. An interview you did over the summer, you discussed another closed-door meeting you had. I think it was at the Pentagon, and there were senior think tankers, CIA people. They were doing some wargaming, and you referenced a senior Treasury official 2 seats away from you, and you mentioned that this next crash would involve the IMF, and obviously the dollar would take a hit. And he turned and said, don't you know the dollar has always been the dollar is the global reserve currency. It currently is today, and it always will be. And it struck me as the arrogance and ignorance of official Washington. Obviously, they're not even planning for these possibilities if they don't admit that they even exist.
Well, that's exactly right. I never. There's no need to mention names. I'm not out to embarrass anybody, but this was a senior United States Treasury official, and that was exactly the dialogue. I talked about the SDR, the same thing we talked about a little bit earlier, and he sort of harumphed and said, the dollar is the global reserve currency and has been for a long time and always will be. And I turned to him and I said, I feel like I'm on Whitehall. In Whitehall in 1913, listening to John Bull say, the sterling is always going to be the global reserve currency. And of course, by 1914, its demise had begun. And by 1944, the demise of sterling was complete. And so it's exactly when you take things for granted, when you're arrogant, when you don't look ahead, that things fall apart for you. So, I love America. I love King Dollar. I would like to see the dollar be the strongest currency in the world. I would like to see it gold backed, but even if it's not gold backed, I'd like to see a monetary policy that was preserving the value of the dollar instead of eroding it. But that's not what we see. We see the opposite. I mean, the Fed has a 2% inflation target. It sounds benign. 2% a year for 35 years cuts the value of the dollar in half. 2% for another 35 years cuts it in half again, meaning in a normal lifespan from birth to 70 years, the value of the dollar is cut 75% that's with 2% inflation. Now imagine 3% inflation or anything higher. It's a form of theft. To me, the inflation target should be zero. No inflation, no deflation. Just keep the value of the dollar as it is, and of course gold is a good way to do that. But that's not what the government wants. They want to steal your money. They just want to do it slowly.
Jim, I want to finish up. We have to go shortly, but I want to talk a little bit about investments. You've already mentioned some hard assets that people can invest in. Certainly, you talk a lot about gold, and you do mention gold shares at time, but I think with caution. But if we take gold in the past year, right now, if you go 1 year back, it's up 16%. And gold, of course, has its ups and downs, but the long trend is there. Now, you have also made a suggestion with the election of Trump, if that occurs, that gold may well go up, $100. And this past week, Trump's political situation has improved, and lo and behold, gold has gone up and has jumped over $1,300. So I wanted you to just make a comment on that, but I also wanted to get your quick opinion on silver. You haven't mentioned silver, but it just seems like people who can't, they're overwhelmed with buying an ounce of gold. That I happen to have the belief that silver still is money, even though it's not emphasized nearly as much as gold.
Well, I agree with that, Dr. Paul. First of all, I own silver and I invest in silver. So there's no way. I talk about gold more because the funny thing about gold is it's actually not good for anything except money. Gold is probably the best form of money, but it's not good for much else. I mean, people talk about industrial uses. There are actually very few. Jewelry, but I consider jewelry to be wearable wealth. You look at an Indian bride, adorned with gold necklaces. That's her dowry. That's her life savings. So it's still a form of wealth. But the thing about silver, there's no way gold is going to the levels I'm talking about where silver will not be along for the ride. So as gold makes its way to $10,000 an ounce, silver will make its way to $100 or $150 an ounce. The good thing about silver, just imagine a slightly more extreme scenario, and I don't think this is a stretch, where, due to cyber warfare, the power grid goes down, banks are shut, you have to sort of go out and find a farmer's market or something, buy groceries for your family. An ounce of gold is probably, a year's worth of groceries, and they picture people with chipping off a little bit of gold. But an ounce of silver, which has always been money throughout U.S. history until not that long ago, is probably the right amount for, a day's worth of groceries or a couple days' worth of groceries. The U.S. Treasury has something called, the U.S. Mint, part of the Treasury has something they call Monster Box. It's 500 1-ounce American Silver Eagle coins. They're beautiful coins. They run... with $20 an ounce, they run about, say $10,000 more or less. But even if you buy 20 for, say, $400, it's a good thing to have. I mean, again, I consider some American Silver Eagles to be no different than battery and flashlights. It's an emergency the emergency resource that everybody should have. By the way, I should make it clear, Dr. Paul, I'm not a dealer. I don't sell gold and silver. I don't get a commission, but I do recommend it for everyday Americans.
Very good, Jim. And again, I want to thank you very much for being with us today. It's been a great interview, and I want to urge our viewers to take a close look at The Road to Ruin. And I think it'd be well worthwhile, and not even to forget about Currency Wars. That's another great book. Jim, thank you for being with us.
Thanks.
Good. And to the viewers, I would like to thank you very much for being with us today. I found this interview very interesting and very timely because lots of things are happening, especially on the verge of an election, and there's been a lot of predictions. But I think Jim has made some reasonable predictions that, in due time, there's going to be another major crisis, and he admits he doesn't know the day. But indeed, he says that it's very likely we can't get past 2018 without another major crisis. So I want to thank you all for tuning in today, and I would like you to come back soon to the Liberty Report.
Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube and RonPaulLibertyReport.com. Go to YouTube, subscribe, check them out. Now, I've been saying it for a long time that, if you want to invest in, the stock market or 401ks, you can do that. But you better have backup plans, gold, silver. Some people choose Bitcoin, but never put all your eggs in one basket. And I emphasize that so much because you don't know what the value of anything's going to be until that situation happens. Now, if you're going to have money in the bank, most people tend to. I always say have half in the bank, half in cash if you choose to use banks. I personally do not keep money in a bank. It's a choice that I've made a long time ago. But again, I don't just, keep a mattress full of cash. I try to put money into things that I know that in a major situation, it will leave me better off than most people that just go along. They're told to put, have a bank account, checking account, and a savings account. Most people believe that's what they need. Everybody, they actually, do this at the colleges. So when you go to college, you're getting your orientations and all that. You sign up for your bank account. You sign up for your housing. And then, go through some jobs tables, put some applications in. But, the high school graduates that are going into college are like, oh, yeah, bank account. Yeah, I got a bank account. Oh, they gave me a cooler and $50 to start out. They go and overdraft, because most bank accounts now allow for overdrafting. So they go overdraft the hell out of a bank account. They end up getting fired or losing their job. They're living off of school loans. Then because they feel they still need a bank account, not only do they pay off what they overdraft, they pay the enormous amount of fees that have occurred usually in collections now. Um, some people are smart enough to probably talk it down to closer to the original amount. Um, I don't think having your money in a bank with what we know is a smart idea. And a lot of what Jim talked about there was point, dead on. I think it was on point, it was dead on, and it's a lot of the rationality behind why I choose to handle my finances the way I do. And I think more people are starting to at least look at I need cash in my pocket just as much as I need it in the bank account. And again, if you're going to have a bank account, I don't hold that against people, but I always tell people have half of it outside of the bank and half of it in the bank. Don't don't keep it all in the bank. Now, I got a couple articles here that kind of, well, I have about three articles here that kind of tie into this in their own ways when it comes to our economy. Two are out of reason. First one I'm going to get into, the system is rigged. Licensing limits the pursuit of happiness. Americans have always taken the idea of the pursuit of happiness rather literally. From east to west, south to north, and back again, each generation tends to reshape the country by moving from place to place in search of better things. Though it hasn't attracted as much attention as overblown fears about declining economic mobility, residential mobility, how easy or hard it is for someone to move from place to place in pursuit of better economic conditions is on the decline. That matters because when it's harder for people to move where the jobs are, it's also harder for them to move up the economic ladder. That's the premise of a new paper by Scott Winship, a senior fellow with the Manhattan Institute. Winship argues that licensing and other regulations like zoning laws make it harder than ever for workers to move from one state to another in pursuit of better jobs. Quote, there is a widespread belief that Americans' economic mobility has declined and that Americans are also less likely to move to opportunity than in the past, says Winship. These two assertions have been linked to argue that um, falling residential mobility is an important factor behind diminished economic opportunity in America. Unquote. There's no doubt that states with higher licensing burdens see lower migration rates. In a wide ranging report released last year on the consensus of licensing, the Brookings Institute identified a gap in migration rates between states with high license burdens and those with lower burdens. There could be a number of reasons for that beyond licensing. Certainly, there's a wide range of reasons why people would leave other state for another. Study um, attempts to prove a causal link between those two things, essentially showing that declining residential mobility is causing declining economic mobility. Most licenses are transferable between states, so even though there might be a wealth of opportunity For interior designers in Washington, D.C., potential workers might think twice about moving there because they'd have to take 2,000 hours worth of classes and pass an exam before they can get a job. More than one-third of all jobs in the United States is now subject to some form of licensing, up from just 1 in 10 jobs in 1970. According to research by Morris Kiner at the University of Minnesota, so more workers than ever before are forced to take their licenses into consideration when thinking about a move. Leah Soman, a law professor at George Mason University, laments that neither major party is discussing these serious issues. In a column at USA Today, Soman notes that the need to reform licensing laws is generally agreed upon by academics on all sides of the political spectrum, but still hasn't caught on with lawmakers, to the detriment of middle and lower income workers. In many cases, lower income workers cannot move to practice their professions in a state because of the new to meet burdensome licensing requirements. Someone writes, interest groups lobbied to ensure that state licensing regimens make it difficult for competitors to come in from other states. In short, the system is rigged against newcomers. And you can read the rest of that article, and there's a nice little video to go along with it. Now, I've talked about regulations, and it really is a monopoly maneuver by lawmakers and large corporations. And other corporations that might not be so large, but within the state they are large. They might not be nationally large, but the industry isn't really national, that monopolized. But in states they can be, because they'll make it harder for people in that industry to come to that state to meet the requirements that these already established ones sometimes are even grandfathered into. So they don't have to meet the same requirements. Then they become the gatekeepers to that industry. And it becomes something that we see a lot more, and it's really kind of in a way harmful, but we're seeing a lot more people that are working off the books, working under the table. And in a way that's a good thing, but we also have a lot of people that are getting so sick and tired of, not making any money working for someone else and watching those people get rich, that they're going off and doing things that they're really not qualified for. Oh yeah, I'll trim that tree up for you, and they kill the tree because they cut too much of it. We have a lot of that going on. So what happens is the opposite effect, where you get a lot of people go, I'm not going to go to that guy that just pulled up and goes, hey, I'll cut that dead tree or trim that tree up for you. Or, they want a licensed person that drives a corporate truck with a big old logo on the side of it that they recognize the name. And that's harmful to small business. The individual worker. I had a buddy that passed away that he did that. He was doing this for ever since, I was young. He had been working for himself, and it got to the point where people, not too many people would hire him anymore. He couldn't just get jobs like he used to. They would turn him down, and he'd quote them and everything, but because he was, a one-man crew, they looked at him sketchy, and they'll take the higher quote from the guy with the big logo on the side. And this, he did a lot of tree cutting. Cut down trees, remove it, turn it into firewood for people sometimes if it's the right type of wood. It became kind of depressing to watch because a lot of these people they were hiring were kind of trained on the job. They probably haven't been doing it for as many years as this my friend was. Not knowing that he had the decades of doing this type of work, and then he also had a tree farm. And watching the licensing and the regulation, it got to a point where he's like, I can't insure myself anymore. They won't hire me if I'm not insured, but it's harder to get one unless I'm right around with the big logo. And I can go work for someone else doing the exact same thing, making a third of the money. So he could make basically the same amount of money working 3 times as hard. And that would give him more customers. But it's really not giving him customers, it's giving some big corporate name on the side of the vehicle. And I kind of told him, I said, we're in a time where they don't want individuals working anymore. And I said, the only way that you're probably going to be able to keep doing it is if you turn it into a corporation, you hire people, and you go through all the BS. Because otherwise they're going to push you out, and that's where we're getting to, unless society changes. But it's up to society to change the way they look at people. And there's ways to, get information. You can find out who they've done work for. Show me an example of some work you've done. So, someone I can talk to that you've done this type of work for. Okay, give me a second here. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to reload my browser here. Okay, now we're sitting on the edge of having this financial crisis, and how this would affect our military could have grave consequences because of the actions that we are doing now. And I honestly think that if Hillary gets into office, that war is more of a possibility. And what you kind of probably haven't noticed quite as much um, in this election cycle that you've seen in previous ones. The anti-war people, the anti-war left especially. The reason I believe that you don't see the anti-war left out like you have in previous ones um, is because Trump's really not pushing for war. They've always come out when the war hawks in the Republican Party start calling out for war, more troops, and this and that, you know. Well, Trump's not really doing that. And then you have Hillary running as a Democratic nominee. So the anti-war left is going, yeah, if we try to call out Trump on little things, it's going to get thrown in our face with Hillary. Which a lot of people are dumping Hillary just for a simple fact that they don't want to try to defend her because they're afraid something new will come out. They'll look dumb. But with this economic crisis looming, we've also been militarily, I believe, compromising ourselves by being involved in so many countries and in so many operations abroad. And this from Christopher Green, AMTV, World War III is on the horizon.
Систему. Сейчас ставят там ракеты. Так?
I'm gonna not play this one because I thought it was verbally translated. I guess this isn't the verbally translated one. I'm just going to urge people to go watch it. World War III is on the horizon. It's a collection of clips. It's Putin talking. You have Hillary. You have Donald Trump. And things they said, Democratic leaders, journalists, military generals, and also statements that have been made in writing about what they're pushing for. So I'm going to urge people to go watch that. Now, let me see if this was a AMTV one where he talks about Putin, I believe it might be. If I can get it to play.
Face Crook stream, so if it does go out during this broadcast, just head on over to YouTube Live. Make sure to like, share, favorite this video. Vladimir Putin is being framed at the United Nations at this very moment for war crimes. Now, we put out a video over the weekend, just a few days prior to Halloween, titled, World War III is on the horizon. There's a lot of detail to that video, and I encourage you to watch it. Please like, favorite, and share it if you haven't already. It's up to, I think, 50, 60,000 views, something in that ballpark. But in it, divulged, is this very critical report and information that behind closed doors, at this very moment, the puppet that makes up the UN and the United Nations is attempting to frame with legal recourse Vladimir Putin in physical recourse in war. Vladimir Putin as a war criminal in Syria. They're trying to accuse him of the countless deaths, hundreds of thousands of people slaughtered in Syria as a result of U.S. intervention, covert and now very mainstream, overt destabilization in this part of the world. You know, where they just overthrow dictator after dictator at the whim of the U.S. federal government and what makes up the Israeli Secret Intelligence Service, ISIS, of which they've been arming and funding. And all of this is admitted clearly by the Pentagon, by the State Department, and by your president, Barack Hussein Obama. And something Hillary Clinton wants to continue, by the way, right? She wants a no-fly zone, which it's been spelled out to us very clearly that Russia and China will respond to that. And there will be war as a result. And she was even asked at the debates, will you shoot down that plane, a Russian fighter jet, as it flies through Syrian airspace? She was like, yeah, pretty much. I'm going to do it. There's going to be freaking world war. I mean, this is very, very serious and very critical. And for those of you that think, oh, you know, it's a conspiracy, it's so extreme. No, it's not. I'm not the only person talking about this. Jill Stein is talking about this, running for president of the Green Party right now. Mainstream politicians are talking about the fact that under the leadership of Hillary Clinton, there will be world war. So how do they get there? How do the establishment elite push us that direction? Very, very carefully. More importantly, how do they make it look like they're not the first actor? That it's not them preemptively attacking Russia. They need a smokescreen. They need a Gulf of Tonkin type catalyst. They need a September 11th. They need a Franz Ferdinand moment, like we saw with the beginning of World War I. All that's coming. But as a precursor to that, they need some kind of legal framework to position Vladimir Putin, more importantly, demonize him in the eye of public opinion, so that he's hated, so he's reviled, and it justifies war against his people. And again, as we stated in our video, we have never been closer, folks, to nuclear war, ever. It's very serious, and yes, it is extreme, and honest to God, it keeps me up at night. You know, I've been quite upset lately, honestly. I'm just being upfront with you guys, because watching this election is very upsetting. knowing what's coming is very upsetting. Kim.com. I spoke about him in our first live stream today, the video number 1. He even tweeted the other day, and this is a guy, he knows what's going on behind the scenes in the tech world. You know, founder of Mega Upload, direct linkages to Julian Assange, etc. He's like, yeah, there's a reason my family lives in New Zealand, because I know World War III is coming. I mean, again, folks, I'm not the only person talking about this. This is biblical. And if you don't believe that, it's just a reversion to the mean. Again, there is always a reversion to the mean. There is always a middle ground to everything, and we're due. The New World Order establishment elite, the powers that be, need a reset button. They've got to reset this broken economy. The facade that makes up 0% interest rates that is currently holding up global financial markets right now. They need a refresher. And they're going to do that through war. And it's very upsetting, and honest to God, very much upsets me. I'm not sure people got the gravity of the video we put out a couple of days ago. This is bombshell breaking news. The UN, the United Nations, a puppet of Western interests, and the United States government and NATO are currently positioning Vladimir Putin as a war criminal. This is what they do, okay? This is what the Ministry of Propaganda does. They brainwash you into believing that these people are evil, that they're the devil, that they're Satan, that he's Hitler. Hillary Clinton has even called him Hitler. It's why they're creating these untruths and fabrications and baseless lies connecting Donald Trump like he's got linkages to the KGB and Vladimir Putin in Russia, for example. They want to put him in that basket. I was just talking to my producer here a few moments ago as we were taking a quick break before shooting this video. You know, you can't have it both ways, Hillary. You know, on one side of the coin, she's like, Donald Trump's KGB, James Carville said this, we played this in the earlier clip, and he's working directly with Russia and Vladimir Putin. And then on the other side, he's going to start World War III if he becomes president. Like, he's going to press the nuke bomb that goes off and targets Russia. That makes no sense. You can't have it both ways. Either he's working for KGB in Russia, and he's a Russian plant, or you can't have both. He's a loose cannon, and he's just going to start war with them. I mean, if he is KGB like you say, Hillary Clinton, or you're insinuating, or James Carville is insinuating, then he's not going to start war with the same people he's working with. They don't want war. They want diplomacy. I mean, it just goes to show you how idiotic their argument actually is, and the narrative is that they put out to the American public, but they don't even think this through at all. They don't even think critically at all that you can't have both of those worlds. Yet, at the same token, if you go through Hillary's digital media platform, like Twitter stream, for example, there's these countless videos put out by Google and others that are like, Donald Trump's going to start World War III. What? That makes no sense. You can go look up this document yourself. This is at the official United Nations organization, one of their websites, ohchr.org. You can just throw this into Google. Special session of the Human Rights Council on the deterioration of the situation of human rights in the Syrian Arab Republic and the recent situation in Aleppo, a place that Gary Johnson's never heard of. And, you know, honestly, if Trump loses, thank Gary Johnson for stealing like some 6% out of the vote that would go Trump's direction. But instead, he's just going to implant himself there to potentially steal the election from him. Just kind of a side note. This letter, and I'll read a little bit of it, was posted as recently as October 21st. Now, during this time, again, we talk about it in this video that we put out, Putin has been sailing a flotilla of warships. 8 of them were spotted recently, a few days ago, off the British coast, coming from north and south, putting the entire Royal Navy on red alert, alarming its neighbors, testing bombs off the coast. This is all happening. He's on his way. He's already there now. Again, most people were paying attention to something else, mainstream media, and these shenanigans that makes up this crisis that is our election right now. His warships are just hanging around Syria right now. He's waiting, for example, and the speculation is that this could be one, he's planning his final blow, an attack against ISIS in Syria to ultimately destroy them. and I'm waving down my producer here right now, just to make a quick adjustment here. There's a lot of speculation that he's about to declare victory in Syria with one last final blow. Is the United States going to let him get to it? Again, none of this really makes sense if you look at it, because Vladimir Putin is at war with ISIS, right? Yet at the same side of this, the United States has actually propelled ISIS. See, the United States is providing cover, air cover, for ISIS, for example, helping them to take key parts of the region of the greater Levant over to cause and create this destabilization effect in this part of the world. So, again, you can Google this. Google is your friend, folks. I'll read a little bit of this. They say, once again, this council has been called to discuss the disgraceful human rights crisis in Syria. The violations and abuses suffered by people across the country, including the siege and bombardment of eastern Aleppo, are not simply tragedies. They also constitute crimes of historic proportions. Well over 300,000, the estimates I've read say up to 500,000 or more, men, women, and children, by the way, civilians, have died and have been killed, and countless others wounded and traumatized in the course of this civil war. Now also a proxy conflict and a training ground really for World War III. This is what both Russia and the United States are using this war-torn nation for. In Syria, it's providing training for what's coming, fueled by cynical regional and international interests. Tens of thousands of people have been abducted, summarily executed, or arbitrarily detained and tortured. Broken, uprooted, and displaced families now number well over half the Syrian population, which, by the way, thanks to George Soros, he's pushing all these people over into the United States to radically help transform our nation in places like Europe. Broken, uprooted, and displaced families now number well over half the Syrian population. Hospitals, schools, marketplaces, water facilities, and neighborhood bakeries have been deliberately and repeatedly attacked. Millions are routinely denied life-saving aid. And the attack, lasting a month, it goes on here, on a humanitarian aid convoy, took these pervasive violations of international law to a new low of barbarity. It goes on and on. Basically, and read this for yourself, this is a precursor, and this is the justification the powers that be need for war against Russia. Not to fight the war in Syria, but to fight the proxy war that turns into a real war in and against Russia. And this is so dangerous, folks. You know, Vladimir Putin has spoken recently, and we put these clips in the video that we rolled out, where he's talking about U.S. NATO encroachment, you know, against his country, setting up what they call a missile defense shield in countries like Romania and Poland, for example, that are just shown to be two gutless nations for U.S. Western interests. He talks about how dangerous that is to Russia and their ability to respond and retaliate from a preemptive nuclear strike. A lot of people think that nuclear war, World War III, as Mark Twain said, you know, if World War III is, fought with nukes, that, World War IV will be, fought with sticks and stones, something along those lines. He talks about how dangerous this actually is, how Russia wouldn't be able to respond in the event of a preemptive strike. And a lot of people think falsely that this idea of mutually assured destruction will prevent the West from preemptively attacking a nation like Russia. And I think a lot of intelligent people like myself, and I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but a lot of very smart people, a lot of them smarter than me, they have a strong suspicion that the United States actually thinks that with a tactical and strategic first preemptive strike, that they can actually be very successful in an attack against Russia. Reset the global economy. Reset the 0% interest rates, this fabrication that makes up trillions of dollars worth of bailouts. Reset the order, the New World Order that Western nations are pushing forward and Vladimir Putin and his allies are trying to prevent. Now, I've done so many videos on this, on how economic warfare is a real threat. It comes before, just like the United States put up an oil embargo against Japan, knowing that they would attack Pearl Harbor at the time. There's a lot of evidence to support this. It's the same reason they've imposed sanctions on Russia. The same reason the United States and her interests have covertly been working with their partners in OPEC to artificially collapse the oil markets, for example. Why? Principally because it hurts Russia. Because Russia uses a lot of these oil subsidies to subsidize its entire nation, something that they should diversify, and I think Putin is actively working to diversify. It puts direct pressure on Putin from the oligarchs. You know, Putin's job isn't that stable right now. He could be overthrown. The oligarchs could get angrier, those that are really in control. So this is a destabilization game plan, and it's exactly what is happening in real life today. Sanctions imposed. They artificially collapse the oil markets. Hence, the ruble collapses. It begins to put tremendous pressure on Vladimir Putin to potentially privatize Russian assets where the U.S. and her interests can potentially take over and seize control of those same assets and interests, something that we haven't seen Putin do. The more pressure they put on him, the more they demonize him, the more they frame world events against him, the more the pressure that they put on Syria, and the last line in the sand, I think Vladimir Putin knows this, which makes up the Bashar al-Assad government, the more it forces Putin into a corner, the oligarchs into a corner, and potentially lays the groundwork for something very, very dangerous, something Kim.com was talking about over the weekend, world war. You know, I don't think people understand how dangerous this is. Even Putin has said it. Hillary Clinton, you're going to get a freaking world war. Donald Trump, you're going to get peace. While at the same time, the Clinton campaign tries to spin it like it's Donald Trump that wants war. And it's so not true. Who will strike first? How will they position this confrontation? What type of nuclear weapons will be used? Now, Russia, by the way, Putin just ordered any students overseas studying abroad to return home immediately. It wasn't a recommendation, it was an order, like return back home to the motherland right now. He's moving warships into Syria. He's running drills, nuclear doomsday drills with up to 40 million people, basically making up the entire Russian population right now, in preparation for a nuclear event in Moscow. And the Western media barely reports this. The American people aren't informed about this at all. You know, we almost had an accident a couple of days ago. Putin blamed the U.S., the U.S. blamed Russia. Well, a couple of fighter jets almost ran into each other. Again, what's going to happen? It could just be a freaking accident that starts that event, that provides the smoke screen and the catalyst that the U.S. needs and her interest needs to propel this war forward. I mean, you've all heard the names before, folks. Rockefeller, Rothschild, Warburg, Soros. Look at it from their perspective. The U.S. is crumbling. They've had to co-opt Donald Trump and rig, potentially, this election. The vitriol is heating up. The boiling pot of water is overflowing. What are they going to do next? The entire U.S. economy and fabric of our societal order is at risk. 0% interest rates, the Federal Reserve holding rates down at zero essentially since the last collapse and failing to raise them more than one time, and they essentially haven't raised anything. It's only 25 basis points higher. We're still at zero. How are they going to reset this mess? You see, they've already transferred all the wealth. That's what 2008 and 2009 was about. It was an engineered heist. It's exactly what it was. And take it from a guy who actually worked on the inside for a major Wall Street firm and saw this happen in real life and provided my motivation and passion for what I do today. Anyone with a thinking cap on and an actual brain knows that that was a heist. They've already transferred all the wealth through the trillions of dollars worth of bailouts to the powers that be that control everything and always have. They've eradicated the middle class completely. Now people are holding on to that last semblance of what they would call a democracy, really a constitutional republic, and we essentially have a war in the streets of America, diametrically opposed with each other. We have the radical left, we have the constitutionalists over here that have nothing in common with each other at all. You know, I was driving through my neighborhood the other day, and there's a Trump sign on one corner and a Hillary Clinton sign on the other. They have nothing in common with each other at all. It's why we're moving to more civil unrest. I think they're trying to quell through public appeasement and front-running the reopening of this FBI Comey investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. It's not like they didn't have them before. They just know something very damaging is about to hit the wires, and they're trying to get ahead of it. All of this leads to a very dangerous and potentially violent situation in the United States of America. And what a better way to control the people than through fear and through war. Remember, we saw it on September 11th, right when the buildings collapsed from World Trade Center 7. Never forget, goes down in a, engineered, pre-planned demolition. I mean, a plane didn't hit, nothing hit, just goes down. It's the only building of its kind in world history that has absolutely collapsed perfectly with nothing hitting it. Everybody knows it's headed this direction. I know it. Many of you know it. Kim.com knows it. The only people that don't know it, I think, is the radical left. Maybe the smart ones, they probably do. But we're moving to that point, and I think we've already moved past that point of no return. And now we see it clearly at the UN, the United Nations, demonizing and framing Putin as the next Hitler, as a precursor and legal justification for the war everybody, including myself and you tuning in, knows is coming. After that framework is laid and they've got the building block for that in place, then all they need is that Gulf of Tonkin moment. Then all they need is that catalyst. I tweeted, and please follow me on Twitter at AMTV Media, we're at a greater risk of an unknown external event over the next few days leading up to November 8th than at any other time. I mean, think about it, folks. This is when an enemy nation hits the U.S. in the balls, or there is that Gulf of Tonkin moment that the U.S. is going to grab onto or maybe even orchestrate and use it as a false flag to position us for that war. That's how dangerous this all is. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Put your comment, question in the box below. Please share this video, like, share, and favorite it. Support us alternatively at AMTV, AMTVmedia.com. Subscribe. Price of a cup of coffee or tea, $4.95 a month, $49.95 a year. Get our stuff out everywhere, folks. Thank you again for everything that you guys do. Get out and vote. Trump, exercise your constitutional right to make your vote and your voice heard. But the repercussions here are very, very serious. They're very, very upsetting. And we all know what's coming. And we know exactly how they're going to position this. There is clear motive for this. The establishment of the AIIB, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the fact that Russia and China are buying gold in droves and selling U.S. treasuries and setting up all these counterpoints to Western-dominated petrodollar influence is a giant warning. Okay, we know what the United States does when countries or leaders try to go off the petrodollar, like Muammar Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein. They kill you. The military-industrial complex holds up the worthless, illusory dollar through blood and war. They take out Gaddafi. They take out Hussein. Why do you think they want to take out Assad? Why do you think they want to take out Putin? Why do you think they want to take out China? The yuan, the renminbi, even the IMF has now included. The Western IMF is included as part of that basket of special drawing rights that makes up world reserve currency. Even they can't stop what's coming. The East versus the West. The erosion and downfall of Babylon. The fall of the petrodollar. The rise of the East, Russia, China, the yuan, the renminbi, otherwise known as the AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, a new military-industrial complex. I mean, we see this in the Spratly Islands right now, the heavily contested islands that, China's dredging up and creating islands, for their Navy forces and airstrips and all these kinds of things. This is what's happening right now. And I've said this many times before, take a bird's nest view and look into the United States right now. It's almost laughable what's going on. We have a reality TV show taking place, a potential constitutional crisis with this election with just days till November 8th. The reopening of a new... Hillary shouldn't have been even allowed to run in the first place. If Comey had done his job from day one, she would have been prevented from running. Now, I talk a lot about Hillary Clinton deserving to be in pound-me-in-the-ass prison if she, goes to court and a jury of her peers sends her there. But what's the reality? I mean, let's just be honest with ourselves. What's the reality Hillary Clinton would ever go to jail, even if she was severely incriminated? I mean, if she gets in, she's going to pardon herself. If she doesn't get in, she'd probably be pardoned by Obama. I mean, what are even the chances of it realistically? I mean, there's so much corruption, and it's festered so much at the tippy top of Washington, D.C. politics today, in Wall Street, which owns her and funnels millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars into her Clinton Foundation, a criminal organization, which should be, charged under the RICO Act. Big technology, all supporting her. I mean, the only guy that doesn't is Bilderberg Peter Thiel, who's pro-Trump and donated a measly $1 million or something like $1.5 million. He's worth a freaking $1 billion, and that's all that was given to Donald Trump. The best outcome for America is if Donald Trump wins. The best outcome. Still doesn't mean that there's not going to be problems. Still does not mean that it's going to stop the inevitable war. Hey, who knows? Maybe that's what the elites want. Get Trump in there, crash the stock markets, which I think is likely to happen, start the new war. Blame him, right? Just like Bill Clinton supposedly was responsible for a booming economy, courtesy Alan Greenspan's 0% interest rates, which just laid the groundwork for the eventual collapse that they blamed on George W. Bush. Maybe that's the whole game plan. Get his ass in there. We all know we're going to war anyways, and we all know the economic collapse is happening. And anyways, get his butt in there. That way we can blame him. Hillary and her cronies can sail off into the sunset. They'll probably set up residency right next door to Kim.com in New Zealand, where they're building their frickin' bunkers right now. WikiLeaks is going to drop something else very, very significant soon. Comey, the FBI, Hillary Clinton, her camp, and all the interests that support her, Wall Street, the banksters, the technology monopolies, are simply getting ahead of the next bombshell of damaging information that they know is coming. It's a public relations move. That was my first instinct. It very much looks like what's panning out today. If you want to see the full analysis, watch the video we put out before this. Maybe we'll go to a few comments from you guys. We'll see, since we're running live, it might be fun to do that. Ask me something good, guys. Again, don't waste my time here. Be smart. Okay, let me see. That was our last cast. Let me get our what's happening live right now. It gives you guys a few minutes to think about a question. I know you've got them. I've run this so many times in my head that I want to hear from you. Title today's video, Putin framed. YouTube does not make this easy to find. Should be coming up here in a moment. You've got it over there. Okay, it looks like I got it too. Okay, let's go to that comment section, and then we're going to wrap up today's show. Please share it. Like it if you haven't already. Can we get 2,000 likes on this? 2,000 likes. Come on, guys, you can do it. You just have to click a freaking button. Share it. Favorite it. Follow me on Twitter. Like us on Facebook. Mary Stevens says, latest on Assange. Well, the latest is the leaks appear to keep on coming. I've done several very, I think, damning videos to indicate that potentially WikiLeaks and Julian Assange himself have been compromised. As of yet, he hasn't shown his face, which people are like, well, that doesn't prove anything, Chris. Well, I'm sorry, the guy can go on camera, make a video, show his face, take a picture with a newspaper. Unless it's happened while I'm broadcasting this video, we haven't seen any of that happen yet. And that somehow is something nobody wants to talk about. The whole idea that potentially he and or WikiLeaks' organization could potentially have been compromised in some way. So the update is, honestly, there is no update. I think something more damning is coming. Maybe that dead man switch, if he is not alive, or maybe he's going to, leak out some. Who knows? I don't know. What is the update? I don't know. I'm getting a lot of emails from you guys like, oh, he showed himself here, and then I look at it. Nope, he didn't. No, that was put out months ago. No, Michael Moore visited him in June. None of it's current. None of it's relevant. So that's the update. I mean, if you think about it, why aren't people in the United Kingdom right now showing up? And I'm not going to mention anyone by name in today's broadcast. They're next door to the Ecuadorian embassy. Why don't they go? They're right there. I mean, they could just walk over. So that's the update. And so I'm answering no. There is no proof of life of Assange yet. The Chosen Juan 21 says elite will physically, mentally fight for presidency. Physical, mentally fight for presidency. Elite won't let anyone get in the way. Joshua Kanowitz says huge false flag as soon as possible. I think you're right. Might come in the form of a constitutional crisis. It could come in the form of a nuke event, a literal bomb. It could come in the form of an EMP, a tech bomb. It could just be an election crisis again. Hillary goes down in a ball of flames. How do they replace her? Obama's got to halt the election. He presides over a third term, etc. I mean, all of these are potential variables. Pavo Coronin says, how to organize the resistance most effectively. Well, I think you're going to see this snowball post the election. That's my humble opinion. I think the secessionist movement will build and pick up steam even further. I think that's what the alternative media and the quote-unquote conservative media and alt-right, you're going to see a gravitation towards that. You're going to see good constitutionalist Americans gravitate towards that. Something I didn't talk about, but that was a really big success that just happened, a week ago, but there's been just so much information hitting with everything around the election. I didn't have time for it. Was that the initial trial with the Bundy and the Oregon standoff? All the guys were acquitted thus far, which I think is a huge, huge victory. Finally, a jury did what was right, viewed these, Ammon Bundy and others as patriots and great Americans for who they actually are. Lavoy Finicum shot in cold blood with his freaking hands up. And you didn't hear a peep of it from the mainstream media because they don't care, because guess what? He's got a cowboy hat on and he's white. It's the new black in this country. It's the new N-word. Shot in cold blood. Anyways, I thought that was a victory, something that we'll be following and, of course, reporting on. So in terms of organization, you will see that manifest itself in the coming months. Somebody said, Eric says, I'm going to probably just go drink a couple of beers and go fishing. Well, it's also important to step back a little bit and honestly enjoy yourself. And people don't like it when I say it, but pray and be humbled and realize that there's a higher power in control, folks. I mean, does it really matter, for example, who drops the first bomb, right? If it's a preemptive strike of the U.S. or a retaliation of Russia, or even if it's vice versa, if it's an accident, if you know it's going to come and you know it's coming, does it even matter? The question you should be asking is, what does it mean for you? What does it mean for you and yours? You and your family? How are you prepared? Right? I mean, does it really matter? I mean, whether you believe it or not, whether or not you think it's biblical, or you think it's just simply a reversion to the mean, this is where, and this is the direction it's headed. I mean, I tweeted very mournfully the other day, I never thought when I was a kid that I would watch the collapse of Rome, of Babylon. I never thought that I would be sitting here today, still relatively a young man, and watch my own nation go down in flames. I never thought it would happen. And it's honestly very, very upsetting emotionally. It really is, because I do care. And I care about you. And I care about everybody out there. I care about the radical left. Because I know that they're going to be hurt when the hellstorm hits. Even if they don't see it coming. We are all human beings. And I don't want to see people destroyed. I don't want to see nations crumble. I don't want to see people dead. You know, when I read figures and independent studies that over 500,000 people are dead in Syria, I mean, I weep thinking about that internally. I weep. And you should too, and everybody should. And what's so wrong about the way the mainstream media and the UN and the West is positioning it is blaming Putin for this, when he had nothing to do with it. It's the U.S. that invaded Iraq and Afghanistan post-September 11th on a baseless lie that made up WMD's weapons of mass destruction. They didn't invade Saudi Arabia, they invaded those countries. It's the West that lied and said they had nothing to do with the rise and creation of ISIS and the destabilization and gun running of weapons in Libya, in Benghazi Gate, and then that came out later to just be a fact that has caused this ripple effect and caused the greater Levant to crumble, to foment ISIS, which has turned into people cutting people's heads off in this part of the world and rolling over into Syria in their next attack to potentially take down Assad. It's not Putin. Mary says, thanks, Christopher. Thank you, Mary. King Ibby says, why do the U.S. want to kill Putin? By U.S., I mean Hillary, etc. Please answer, bro. Well, petrodollar. He is a direct threat. Russia and China and the oligarchs are a direct threat to the military-industrial complex protected petrodollar. That's the reason. Okay, it's a total illusion. The dollar is backed by nothing, not gold, not a commodity, not even a digital algorithm. Nothing. There is no difference between a single dollar bill and a $100 bill. It's the same worthless piece of paper it was printed on. And the only thing that protects it is blood and war. That's it. Russia and China are a threat to that. No fault of their own. They're running, they're just, growing their nations, building themselves up. It's competition. The United States will not have it. When Muammar Gaddafi wanted to move off the dollar-based system, they killed him. When Saddam Hussein, as Bush would say, Saddam wanted to go off the petrodollar, we invaded Iraq. And they hung him. That's why they want war with Putin. That's why they want war with China. And that's why they're taking out the red line. And everybody knows this. Putin clearly knows this. The oligarchs know this. They want to take Assad out. He's the last country and man standing before NATO just rolls through and rips apart that entire region, and Putin loses any kind of semblance of control and, more importantly, self-defense. With that missile defense shield just hanging out in countries like Poland and Romania right now, there's extreme danger. There's a reason Putin is running these drills, these nuclear bomb drills with 40 million Russians. I don't think it's psychological warfare. I don't think it's a stunt. They're really preparing. And what are your leaders? How are they helping you to prepare here? They're not doing a gosh darn thing. The only thing the media can report is the latest, Huma Abedin, Anthony Weiner freak show. That's what we get here in the West. And hopefully that answers your question. That's why they want to take him out. And they will kill him, just like these other leaders. Again, there could be another Franz Ferdinand moment, folks. Study your history. Kez says, you're 100%. I'll be sharing this everywhere. Thank you. Like this. 2,000 likes. Can we get it? Can we get it, guys? Can we get it? 2,000 likes? Click the like button, favorite, share it, tweet it, get it out everywhere. Mike Smith says, Trump green 2020. Maybe. I wouldn't rule anything out. If you guys supported it, I'd do it. Why not? Doesn't sound like a fun job, but who knows? Maybe it'll be Trump green of the new republic. Think about that for a moment. Craig says, we are in a matrix. Mark Edwards, military coup if Hillary wins. It's another reason why you need to reach out to your friends in the military, those that are serving. And these are a lot of great people. They're a lot of them very, very educated. You need to reach out to them.
AMTV Christopher Green, Check them out on YouTube, AMTV. Subscribe. Check them out. Now, when we look at the stance that Russia's taking right now, they are going out and just, ringing the bell, or, ringing the alarm. They are saying, hey, look what is going on. This is what is happening. Now, they have their own agenda. They have their own propaganda involved. And that has to be understood too. So we can't analyze everything as 100% fact with what comes out of Russia. But what we know is going on, what they try to tell us, meaning our government, about what's going on, and the facts that are coming out of Russia, lead me to believe that Putin is telling more of the truth than our government is. Now, again, he has his own agenda, and I do not trust that. I'm not siding with Putin. I don't agree with Putin's policies. I'm a libertarian. Not libertarian party, libertarian type of philosophy and ideology. We keep talking about the potential under Hillary. But we also have that potential under Trump too, in a different way. Under Trump, Russia might not be our enemy. It might be our ally. Some of Trump's rhetoric leads me to believe if we have issues with Mexico, that he would maybe be willing to use force in Mexico. If any country really tries to bully America, I think he would have a short fuse. I don't know. It's something that would have to be seen. But again, we don't have a good option. Now, Christopher is more of a Trump supporter than I am. I'm not a Trump supporter. This election is really just leaving us with no good outcome. And you know what's even worse? The ownership of this country has been centralized. You think your vote matters. What made people's vote matter in the past was they owned their property. They clearly understood the Constitution. But we've completely walked away from common law. And really, that is what the Constitution has a basis on. You can call it, natural law, God's law, common law, which common law is a little bit different, but they all have a basis. And I came across this article here out of This came out of FE.org. Excuse me. FE.org, Foundation for Economic Education. Common law gave you real property ownership. And I came across this article, and I've already been talking about this lately with a few people about property and not really owning it anymore. There is no ownership of property in a true meaning. And then I came across this article. I was like, hey, just talking about that. It says here, there is a standing joke among the libertarians that for the first question out of people's mouths when they hear one is a libertarian is who will build the roads. People are even more dumbfounded when they encounter anarcho-capitalists. They immediately imagine a lawless realm descending into a Mad Max type violent future. That people lived for centuries and managed their affairs with minimal or no state-provided law seems never occur to them. Yet we have a marvelous example of a highly complex, sophisticated system of natural law in widespread use today in America, and most people don't even know it even exists. I am referring to the laws of governing real property ownership. With minor variations between the states, the law governing the use and ownership of real property emerged as part of English common law. What is common law? It is law emerging from local custom and judicial precedent as opposed to law that is created legislatively. When the English people settled in America, they brought their system of common law land titles to this country. Unlocking the value of real property. Why do I say that the system is highly complex and sophisticated? Think about this for a moment. What was the most valuable thing a person could own 1,000 or 600 years ago? Land. Land provided everything that was essential for human life. The ability to create shelter, grow food, to feed livestock, to hunt, and to access water. And hopefully my Skype doesn't crash. Okay. And water all require land. If value is wholly located in one thing that cannot be moved, the question becomes, how does one unlock the value of the land? Suppose there were more deer to be hunted than the local farmer wanted to consume. Suppose the local landed gentry wanted to ride their hunters across the fields. But they also wanted their tenants to grow crops on the land so they would prosper. Suppose there was coal beneath the land. One couldn't separate the land into its component parts and sell off those parts individually, or could one? What if ownership was conceived of not to be an all or nothing affair, but as a bundle of rights, any one of which could be conveyed away? Think of all the things one could do with real property, and then imagine what things could be split into separate rights that could be sold or leased to others for whatever period of time the parties agree. The right to reside on the land forever, in fee or for a term, for life of widow. The right to hunt or fish on the land the right to harvest crops or timber on the land, the right to use water while it passed over the land, the right to sublease one's rights on the land, the right to extract minerals, the right to dam the flow of water, which um, would by necessity involve the downstream owner too, the right to subdivide the land into smaller parcels, the right to use the airspace above the land, the right to use the subsurface area, the right of passage by foot, horse, or car, the right to leave the property to one's heirs. Each one of these rights could be held by separate parties. Each party would fully utilize the right he purchased only so long as he did not interfere with the rights held by others. No landowner could convey a right to a second party if he had conveyed it exclusively to the first. By envisioning and creating a system of non-absolute ownership, landowners were able to maximize the use and value of the only asset they were likely to own. This was an extraordinary development in common law. And then read the rest of this article. They go into liars and cheaters when it comes to your property, policy implications, and all that. Actually, I'll cover the policy implications. Today, we can see that the rights that comprise ownership of real property are increasingly under attack by both federal and local governments. Property can be taken outright through a process of eminent domain, in which event one is at least fairly compensated for loss of one's property. More often, though, one or more of the bundle of rights of ownership is taken by regulation without compensation to the owner. When a locality prohibits the owner from leasing his property, from growing vegetables in his front yard, from saving the rainwater that falls on his property, or from allowing non-related others to reside on his property, the locality is taking one of the sticks from the bundle of rights that comprise the ownership interest of the property owner. If Americans understood our excellent common law tradition of real property ownership, they might not be so sorry, it froze up. I won't scroll down. Oh, there it goes. Too far. Tradition of real property ownership, they might not be so sanguine about losing the ownership rights one right at a time. And haven't we talked about this before, how they slowly chip away at your rights? Oh, that little bit ain't gonna hurt. Oh, that little bit ain't gonna hurt. Oh, that little bit ain't gonna hurt. Well, eventually they're gonna hit that nerve. Eventually they're going to get deep enough to hit that nerve. By then, it's too late. You don't have to burn your hand to feel the heat. I think that's the best way to describe it. You turn on a stove top. You put your hand over it. You don't have to burn your hand to feel the heat. You don't even have to get close to burning your hand under, feel the heat from afar and know that the closer you get, the worse it's going to be for you. But that's where we are with our rights. We keep allowing them to chip away. It's like moving your hand closer to that flame on that stove. Now starting to be a little uncomfortable. You're starting to bust a sweat. And they chip away a little bit more, and your hand gets a little bit closer. Now I'm starting to feel, my skin burn. It's really starting to kind of turn from irritation to a hurt. Or does your hand have to be on fire to understand what they're doing? That we allow? Because as long as you just go on about your business and don't raise these issues, they'll keep doing it. And even when you do raise issues, that's not a guarantee. But what it does do is wake up more people. And the best thing we could do is find things we agree on. We agree on prices are too high for what we make. For people that are, what people are left in the middle class and the poor people. And there's even wealthy people that are like, you see the price of this stuff? People expected years ago when the iPhone first came out. They said, oh, and in a few years, that thing will be, $50. Well, they keep upgrading it and keep upgrading the newer iPhone. Still running around the same price. So, I've almost come to the conclusion through all of these regulations, all of this has stalled America. America is stalled out. A lot of this technology that we see going on isn't new. We talk about new gene splicing and, these new crops that are going to come. We've been doing all this. We're not seeing the giant leaps that we once were. And when we look back at our economy, I don't think it's hard to see why. Creativity has been regulated. The ability for people to prosper off of their own fruits of their labor have been hacked away. Most of the fruits of your labor now go to other people. These people are fine making the money that they're making. They have less reason to innovate, and the only innovation they really do is to save a buck. Why? Because they're struggling to make a buck. So now they innovate only to save a buck. I got one last article I want to cover. And this one's from Reason.com. San Diego police seize family's bank accounts because the dad ran a medical marijuana business. James Slatic, a California medical marijuana business owner, found out all of his family's bank accounts had been seized by the government one day in January when his 19-year-old daughter tried to buy lunch at the San Jose State University cafeteria and her card was declined. Slatic's wife tried to transfer money to their daughter, figuring she had simply overdrawn her account. Hey, I was talking about that earlier. as teenagers are known to do. But her account wouldn't work. Either what the Slotics soon learned was that San Diego police had frozen all their bank accounts. 55,258 from Slatic's personal checking and saving account. 34,175 from his wife, Annette, Anita, or I'm not sure, account, and a combined 11,260 from the saving accounts of their two teenage daughters, Penny and Lily. Just imagine what it's like when you're a 57-year-old businessman with 3 kids in a house and supporting elderly parents, and all of a sudden all your money is gone, Slatic says in an interview with Reason. It's disappeared. Your car payment bounces, your insurance doesn't go through. The Slatic's crimes, none. Or at least the San Diego District Attorney's Office hasn't charged them with any in the 9 months since it had seized their accounts. On Tuesday, the Institute for Justice, a libertarian-leaning public interest law firm, filed a motion in California District Court seeking the return of roughly $100,000 of Slatic family's money. The Institute for Justice argues the seizure was a brazen and illegal use of civil asset forfeiture, a practice that allows police to seize property they suspect connected to a crime. The owner often does not have to be convicted or even charged with a crime. I've not come across an abuse of civil forfeiture this shocking, says Wesley Hatut, a attorney for the Institute for Justice. We decided to become involved because his family's plight illustrates the power of civil forfeiture. Even when you've got rules in place, like in California, to protect property owners, police can still seize virtually everything you own based on one officer's suspicion. Law enforcement groups say asset forfeiture is a vital tool to disrupt drug traffickers by cutting off their ill-gotten proceeds, but civil liberties groups argue the perverse profit incentives lead police to target everyday citizens who then must prove their innocence to get their own property back. The trouble for James Slatic began 5 days before his family's accounts were frozen, when around 30 San Diego police officers and DEA agents raided Slatic's medical marijuana business, Midwest Distribution, and seized nearly $325,000 in cash from a safe. Slatic says he worked with the city to obtain all the necessary permits for his business, which refine marijuana oils for use in vaporizers and topical ointments. He is also politically involved in California's marijuana regulations and served on the board of the Marijuana Policy Project and the California Cannabis Industry Association. I've heard of asset forfeiture before, but naively thought it was for people who don't pay their taxes or some other tawdry thing, not people who create jobs and pay taxes and are involved in the political process, Slatic says. I didn't consider myself to be a potential target, but I was wrong. Surveillance video shows the heavy armed law enforcement officers breaching the door and detaining Midwest employees at gunpoint. And the video is posted up there at Reason.com. San Diego police seize families' bank accounts. The raid was a crushing blow to Slatic, not to mention his 35 employees who lost their jobs and benefits without notice. But he never thought the police would go after his family's money as well. Slatic says they've been relying on help from family and friends, credit cards, as well as online fundraising campaign although that hasn't made much a dent in the roughly $70,000 in legal fees he incurred so far. The Institute for Justice argues there was no probable cause to raid Midwest. According to the warrant, law enforcement suspected Midwest of illegally producing hash oil and violating a California statute that bans the chemical extraction of controlled substances. The problem, Slatic and the Institute for Justice argue, is that Midwest only refined THC oil, not extracted it, using laboratory equipment, a far cry from a clandestine combustible drug lab. Likewise, the Institute for Justice says there is no traceable line between the alleged criminal activity and the personal bank accounts of Slatic's wife and daughter. You have to directly tie every dollar to a particularized allegation, and they've done none of that, Holtot said. It's as if they think they have a blank check to take everything from a legal medical marijuana business owner's family, even if we were to accept that the district attorney has a legitimate investigation. They still don't have a reason to take everything from his family and leave them nothing. In a statement, a spokesperson for the San Diego District Attorney's Office says the investigation related to this DEA task force raid is ongoing and the case remains under review for potential criminal charges. In addition, the primary mission of the asset forfeiture program is to enhance public safety by removing the proceeds of crime and other assets relied upon by criminals to perpetrate their criminal activity. The spokesperson continues, when it comes to spending the funds, we're obligated to follow nationwide policies, procedures, and guidelines set up by the Department of Justice. San Diego District Attorney Bonnie Dumaines and the city have been particularly aggressive in policing medical marijuana businesses. Although the police were working as part of a Drug Enforcement Administration task force, federal prosecutors were blocked from going after the Slatic by legislation authored by the California GOP Representative Dana Rockbacher that restricts Justice Department funds from being used to prosecute people who are in compliance with state medical marijuana laws. And you can read the rest of that at reason, but it's just another example, when you decide to come up, what a lot of people don't understand, even in the medical marijuana industry, is there's already a monopoly being created between some of the top people in the industry. If that's this situation or not, I don't know. But government, again, you're guilty until proven innocent, and asset forfeiture is one of the big things, and it all goes against the Constitution. You're having property taken without charges, without a guilty verdict. You've lost your rights. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay tuned here on UCY.tv. Great broadcast coming up after this. And don't forget to go to UCY.tv. You can click the support tab at the top and donate to UCY, help cover operating costs and expand. And you can also scroll down to the bottom, click the Amazon button, go to Amazon and shop through UCY.tv, and we get a little kickback to cover operating costs on the network end. And, we were talking about precious metals. Go to antityrannynews.com/metal and check out Amagi Metals, my personal source for my precious metals. Something you should check out. Stay tuned.
Bye.